Chilling tales for dark nights.
The Scarecrow Corpse by Chris Mallory. Narrated by Markiplier. The following testimony was emailed to me recently by an old friend. I haven't heard back from him. I hope he's okay. As you know, I'm in, or was in, training to be a coroner. My education was almost complete, and I had been working a paid internship with a well-known medical examiner in the Washington, D.C. area. All that changed a few hours ago when I was fired from the office for refusing to participate in what I believe to be a cover-up. Even though they warned me about consequences for leaking any information about this case, my conscience wouldn't be clear if I kept quiet. This is something people need to know. A few days ago, we received a call from the Metro Police about a possible body discovered on the Red Line. Since working here, we've responded to a few calls in the subway system. The first time, it was a woman who tripped over someone's rolling suitcase while trying to pass by on the escalators. She ended up with a broken neck. Twice we went out there for a heart attack, once for a late-night mugging that went bad. The poor guy was stabbed repeatedly in the stomach, even though he handed over his watch and wallet like the mugger requested. So far, I haven't seen anything especially gory, and it was a bit of a letdown when the dispatch officer said the man was found just sitting on the train. Is it wrong that I've been looking forward to a call about someone either jumping or being pushed in front of a train? The interesting thing is the wording of the dispatch request. Possible body. If the word possible is in front of body, maybe it's the paramedics that should be responding and not the coroner's office. When we arrived, the paramedics actually were on the scene, so we figured it was just a miscommunication and we were called out prematurely. Police tape blocked off the entire station platform. From our view at the top of the escalators, we could tell something wasn't right. The paramedics stood outside the door to the train car and they weren't actually doing anything except arguing and pointing at a body slumped up against a window inside. We could have left, but since it was a slow evening, we decided to take a look anyway just to see what was going on. As we approached, I overheard some of the conversation between the two paramedics. "He's dead, right?" said the older of the two. "Dead people don't do that." "Do what?" I thought. Once they saw us, they quickly agreed that the man was dead and promptly left the scene to us. Clearly, this wasn't a call they wanted to handle. I can understand that. The police weren't much help either. I chatted with the officers on the scene while the doc went in to take a look at the man on the train. One of the detectives commented that there weren't any clear signs of foul play. The witnesses all claimed that the guy just sat down like everyone else and then he stopped breathing. Natural causes, I thought. Seemed like a pretty cut and dry case, but when I looked over my shoulder at the doc, he seemed confused. "Look at this," he said to me as I walked into the train. As I approached, it seemed like the man was just napping, like a lot of train riders do when they know their stop won't be coming up for a while. "Look at what?" I asked. "His eyes." The man's head was forward, with his chin to his chest, so that I had to kneel down to get a good look at his face. As I'm doing this, the doc is talking out loud like he tends to do, just going over his mental checklist. "Not breathing, no pulse, his skin is cold to the touch, approximate time of death, 6 to 8 hours ago." I'm in the aisle of the train, trying to make do with a pin flashlight since the dim lighting on the train wasn't helping things much. The man's eyes were open, and they seemed to be staring at me. It's not uncommon, so I lean in closer hoping to figure out what it is the doc wanted me to see so that I don't look like an idiot. And then he blinked. I jumped back as quick as a mongoose would jump away from a cobra. "What the fuck?" I tried to say. "Exactly," the doc said. "Gotta be a muscle spasm, right?" "You would think," he says. "But watch this." He grabs the guy by the hair and pulls his head back. With his other hand, he waves a finger in front of the man's open eyes, which then began to follow along as the doc moves his finger left and right. Then the man looked at me and blinked again. "Have you ever seen anything like this before?" I ask. "Nope." "And he's dead?" "As a doornail." We let the officer in charge know that we couldn't determine the cause of death on site. A full autopsy would need to be performed to make any kind of determination. She made a note in the report that this body had a tendency to follow you with its eyes and occasionally blink. Off the record, she told me the whole case bothered her. The man, she said, didn't have any identification. Credit cards, watch, jewelry, a phone, or even money. All they found on him was a train ticket and a napkin. Once we had him back at the office, we changed into our examination coveralls. I was asked to deal with his clothing. The man watched me the whole time as I stripped off his business suit. He even winked at me once. Also, a few odd things were noted about the clothing. First, he wasn't wearing any undergarments. Normally, people wear a t-shirt, boxers, a brief, and socks. This guy wore none of those things. But for some reason, he had on 2 belts, one over the other. The doc switched on his tape recorder and then turned on the buzzsaw. I watched as he performed the Y incision, and I made a mental note of his perfect technique so that I could try and do it better next time. I'm telling you, the doc is a real artist. Next came the enjoyable cracking sound as the ribcage was pried open. While this was happening, the man's eyes watched us. I could almost swear he was smiling too. Over the next hour, the doc made notes as he did the exam. He handed me each organ to be weighed and cataloged. There was nothing strange or out of the ordinary about any of the internal organs. "Okay," the doc said. "Let's take a look inside his head. I want to see what's causing the eye movement." "Listen, do you mind if we tape the eyes shut first?" I tried to remain as professional as I could, but the constant blinking unnerved me. The doc didn't mind, so I took some suture tape and worked up the courage to manually close the guy's eyelids and tape them down. Immediately, they started moving fast. His whole face was convulsing and contorting itself, trying to break free of the tape. "I don't think he likes that," the doc said, and then he removed the tape from the man's eyes. The violent motion stopped right away, and the man winked at the doc. "This isn't natural," I said. "There's a scientific reason for everything. It's our job to find it," the doc replied. "But he actually fought to get the tape off his eyes." "I guess he wants to watch. Now, do you want to remove the skull, or should I?" I'm too shaken to handle the equipment, so I watch as the doc works the saw around the man's skull. The bastard is smiling. I'm sure of it. He's staring at me and blinking his left eye and then his right eye back and forth. I hear the familiar popping sound caused by the top of a skull being pulled off. "Whoa. Okay," the doctor says. "What is it?" I ask as I'm walking around to see what he's seeing. The man's eyes follow me, of course. "I think I might have to call this one in." Dear God. The brain was missing. "Doc?" I ask. "Not now. Pack up and go home. I'll finish cleaning this up." He's saying this as he's already dialing a number on the phone. "But just go. I'll call you later." It isn't a request. I know when to shut up and listen. I make my way to the door knowing that the man is still staring at me. "And don't say anything to anyone." The doc never called me back. Each time I tried to reach him, it went to voicemail. I tried to go back the next day. Security won't let me in the building. They said I was to await further instructions while on paid leave. That was 4 days ago. This morning I hear a knock at my door. It's a man who said he was with the medical examiner's office, but he looks as if he's with the CIA, FBI, NSA, or some other 3-letter agency. He asks if he can come in to talk. I open the door to let him in, and as I do, I notice 2 other similarly dressed men sitting in a black Suburban across the street. The folder he hands me is a case file for the John Doe that was found on the train. All of the notes about the eye movement and the blinking were removed. There was no mention of anything out of the ordinary, let alone a missing brain. It's already got the doc's signature on it, and this man is asking for me to sign it as well. I try to tell him the file is wrong, but he holds up a hand to stop me from speaking. "This is how it happened. Sign it," he said. I ask about the doc. I want to know why I haven't heard from him. He says the doc has been let go. The way he says it makes me think the worst. I refuse to sign it and ask to speak to the director of the medical examiner's office. The man informs me that would be impossible and that I am to be fired. But fired isn't the word he used. The word he used was terminated. He leaves when I ask him to go, but he warns me that mentioning this to anyone would have serious consequences. As soon as the door closed behind him, I packed a bag and took off. I saw that a black Suburban was parked at the end of my street, and I might just be paranoid, but I think it pulled out after I did. Just in case I was being followed, I changed directions several times. When I felt it was safe enough, I pulled into a nearby residential neighborhood and found an open Wi-Fi signal. I think something strange is going on in DC, maybe elsewhere as well. I don't know what it could be, but I feel like the doc and I stumbled onto something we weren't supposed to know about, and now we're in danger. I found the doc's home number online. When I called, it went straight to voicemail. I tried to leave a message for him, but the line went dead once I began talking. If someone is monitoring my phone calls, it's possible my car is bugged too, and they already know exactly where I am. Again, maybe I'm just paranoid or crazy. Maybe there is a completely logical explanation for the scarecrow corpse that stares and blinks and winks and smiles. I can't imagine how anything like that could exist or why. I'm scared. Really, really scared. I decided the only thing to do would be to write this and email it out to everyone I know. Hopefully this information will make it to someone. If you've received this and haven't heard back from me by tomorrow, then I'm probably dead, and you'll know what I've written is true.
I've been lying down for hours now. It's 5:35 a.m. and there's not much I can do. You know what the worst part about my situation is? I'm in the same room with my parents. They keep looking at me, and I can't help but look back and try not to cry or scream. Their eyes are focused on me, and their mouths are wide open. There's the strong scent of blood, and I feel so paralyzed with fear. Here's the thing. The second I make any hint that I'm not asleep anymore, I'm completely fucked. I will die, and there's nobody around to save me. I've been trying to think of a way out, but the only idea I have is to rush for the front door and run outside to scream for help, hoping that my neighbors will hear me. It's risky, but if I stay here, I'll surely die. He's waiting for me to wake up and see his masterpiece. You're probably wondering what's going on. I'm sorry, I do get ahead of myself sometimes. About 3 hours ago, I heard screaming coming from the other side of the house. I got up and went to check on the noise before realizing I had to use the bathroom. Instead of doing the smart thing and investigating, I used the bathroom first. I could have gotten myself killed right then for my stupid actions. But I actually did my business and took a peek outside the bathroom door. There was blood on the carpet. I got very worried and ran back to my room, hiding under the sheets like the pussy I was. I tried to convince myself to go back to sleep, that it was just some really vivid dream or something like that. But I heard my bedroom door open. Like the terrified child I was, I peeked from under my blankets to see what was going on. I could see something dragging my dead parents into the room. It wasn't human, I can tell you that. It was hairless, with no eyes and no clothing. It walked like a caveman with its back slouched as it dragged my parents. But this thing was much smarter than any caveman. It was aware of what it was doing. It propped my dad up on the edge of my bed and made him face me. It then sat my mother down in the chair and positioned her towards me as well. It started rubbing its hands upon the wall, staining them with blood, and then drew a circle with the devil's pentagram in it. This thing had made what it would probably call a masterpiece. To finish it off, it scribbled a message onto the wall that I could not read in the darkness. It then positioned itself under my bed, waiting to strike. The scariest thing is now, my eyes have adjusted to the darkness and I can actually read the message on the wall. I don't want to look at it because it's terrifying to even think about it. But I feel the need to see before I'm killed. I peek at the creature's masterpiece. I know you're awake.
Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. Last of the Sparks. My name is Aaron Sparks. Back in February 2008, I decided I needed to change my monotonous life. Whether that change would come in the form of a new job or a new toothbrush, I didn't know. I was never the most adventurous person. I've always found it difficult to veer away from my comfort zone, and the limit of my existence usually depended upon which book I was reading at the time. It took me a while to realize that most of the happiness in my life was derived from works of fiction, from stories I often found myself lost in for days at a time. I was an avid bookworm, as miserable an expression as that is. Once I realized my true outlet, I immediately knew what I wanted. I purchased a small shop, quit my boring job, renovated the building, and transformed it into a bookstore. I'd never been happier. The next 2 years were the best of my life. The store had become a huge hit with the locals. My perspective on work had been completely altered, and I was feeling genuinely happy for the first time since my childhood. It was during the winter of 2010 that she walked into my store. She stepped inside out of the snow and approached me with a large bin bag. Etchings of age covered her pale face and hands. She must have been at least 80 years old. Slamming the bag on the counter, she simply said, "These are for you." I looked inside the bag to find a selection of some of the greatest novels ever written. "Why?" I asked, confused. "Do you want money for these, or some kind of book trade?" "No, they're yours to have," she said. "Take them." A feeling of unease swept over me as I stood in the woman's presence. Her dirty gray fringe slightly concealed her face as a cold gaze met my vision. "Are you sure you want me to have them?" I asked. "Wouldn't you rather sell them?" "No, I have no use for them, or for money." "Okay, thank you. What's your name?" "Lucy." She departed from my store shortly after muttering her final words. I found it all too strange that somebody would give away such great books for nothing, but I suppose some people are just nice. I made my way home that night and took the books with me so that I could go through them. I piled them all up on the table and was surprised to see that all of them were in fantastic condition. A couple of them seemed to be first editions, and others were versions I had never even seen before. It took me a moment to realize it, but the novels that I was looking at were not as I had remembered them to be. The first book that I picked up was The Green Mile. On the cover there was an image of John Coffey, smiling and holding two dead naked girls. I opened it up and flipped through the pages. In this version of the novel, he was in fact guilty of the rape and murder of both children. I made my way to the end of the book and read through the execution scene. All of the officers who had originally grown to love John Coffey in the original novel were now laughing uncontrollably and screaming racial taunts as he was being executed. My eyes had seen enough, and my stomach had felt enough, too. The next book I picked up was The Catcher in the Rye. The artwork upon the front page seemed to be of a dead body splattered on the street, as seen from an aerial perspective. I flipped through the book until I reached chapter 14. After Holden Caulfield speaks of messing with the idea of suicide, he suddenly breaks down in tears and jumps from the window, cracking his skull on the pavement below. The book abruptly ended after that. I then picked up Lord of the Flies. The defining image of this novel was of a large child with the face of a pig. He was covered in blood and surrounded by decaying corpses. After thumbing through a few pages, I reached a point of the story in which Piggy is described as being non-human, vicious, and a hungry animal. A chapter or so later, Jack insulted Piggy, which led him to lose his temper and rip Jack apart. Piggy then proceeded to kill and eat the rest of the children. The remainder of the book was the same line repeated over and over. Piggy sat alone on the island waiting for death. I read through the few books that were left in the pile, and they had all been changed in some sick way. The Great Gatsby, Wuthering Heights, To Kill a Mockingbird, Ulysses, every one of them. Just as I reached the bottom of the pile, I noticed that the final book was one that I had never even heard of before. It was called Last of the Sparks. Considering the contents of the other books thus far, I found the inclusion of my last name in the title unnerving. Still, it was just a book. The cover was of 6 gravestones, with words too small to be read, etched into the granite. I looked at the top corner of the book and noticed there was a sell-by date on it. June 4th, 2013. I nervously opened it up to the beginning of the story. Chapter 1. Alice Sparks. My stomach dropped as I read my mother's name upon the page. I felt dizzy and confused as I anxiously made my way through the chapter. It seemed to detail a regular day in the life of the character. That is until I reached the last page. Alice was crossing the road when the heel of her shoe broke, causing her to fall. She didn't get to her feet fast enough and a speeding car struck her, puncturing both of her lungs. I felt sick to my stomach. I put the book down and went straight to bed, hoping for some sleep. As it turned out, that was wishful thinking. I lay awake for most of the night as innumerable questions ran through my mind. By daybreak, I had managed to get a couple hours of sleep, but only after I spent an hour convincing myself that there was nothing to worry about. It's just a book, I told myself. It's just a book. The next morning when I got to work, I was feeling worse for wear. It wasn't until lunchtime that I began to perk up and regain a bit of energy. Then the phone rang. I answered the call, and I heard my father sobbing on the other end. I immediately knew what had happened. I closed the shop and ran to the hospital, but it was already too late. She was gone. The victim of a hit-and-run driver going 60 in a 35, they said. I spent the next couple of weeks helping take care of my dad. Me, my brother, and my sister stayed with him in turns and looked after him. We all looked after each other. It wasn't until a few months later I picked up Last of the Sparks again. It had scared me so much the last time that I considered tossing it in the trash. But I never did. Rather, I felt strangely compelled to hang on to it. I opened the book up to page 37. And there it was. Chapter 2. Patrick Sparks. The story was more of the same. A day in the life of a man that bore my father's name. It documented an ordinary day. Ordinary, that is, until the part where he shot himself in the kitchen whilst on the phone with his son. Suddenly, I was possessed by an urge to run to the phone and call my father, to speak with him, comfort him. But then I realized what I may be doing. Before I had the chance to hang up, someone picked up on the other end. Then he was gone. I got my black suit and tie out once more and repeated the same process for another parent. It ruined us all. After the funeral, I refused to touch the book. What if I caused these deaths by reading it? I couldn't go through it all again. But on Christmas Eve of 2011, I got a phone call from my brother's wife, Heather. Will had been putting up Christmas lights on the roof when he slipped on a patch of ice-coated shingles and broke his neck. He died almost instantly, the coroner said. I lost it. I threw the phone at the wall and began to sob into my sleeve. Anger took the pain away for a moment, long enough for me to pick up the book and read through chapter 3. It was exactly as Heather had described. I fell asleep and woke up the next day with the book still on my lap. I decided to read ahead and discover who would be the next to go, whether it be me or one of my sisters. Whoever was next, I was determined to warn them, or give myself advance notice, as the case may be. I turned the page. Chapter 4. Mary and Sarah Sparks. I rushed through the story as fast as I could until I reached the end. Both my sisters and their partners would drown in a lake after colliding with another car on a one-way bridge. That same sickly feeling overtook me. I met with my sisters later that day to exchange gifts, and I told them as calmly as I could that they ought to be careful while driving. I tried to sound as sincere as possible as I mentioned the lake, the bridge, and even the fact that all 4 of them would be in the car at the same time. Of course, they didn't take me seriously, chalking up my apprehension up to fears of losing more loved ones. But at least I told them. Mary and Sarah drowned 8 months later in August 2012. Following the funeral, I picked up the book and turned to the final pages. Chapter 5. Aaron Sparks. But I didn't read it. I decided I'd rather not live in fear for who knows how long. So I decided to save it for a later time. After all, there was a sell-by date on it for a reason. Everything has been normal for the past 5 months or so. I've lost interest in reading, though, so I'm back to my old miserable self. I questioned myself every day as to why the old woman was doing this to me. But it doesn't matter. It's all gonna be over soon anyway. I've just finished reading the final chapter. It's June 4th, 2013, and I'm sitting in my basement, waiting for her to arrive. That's the way the ending goes. Or so I've read.
You've known this your whole life. Written by Christopher Bloodworth. Narrated by Mangaminx for chilling tales for dark nights. You've known this your whole life. Kissing my husband goodbye this morning made my stomach roll over in a way it never had. Why? Because early this morning, something happened. Something I can't explain. I woke up at 3:06 a.m. I remember because when I woke up, I opened my eyes to the glowing red numerals of our alarm clock. Why does that matter? Because the alarm clock is on my husband's nightstand. I yawned and rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling, confused as to how I got to his side of the bed. When I looked over to my side, every muscle in my body froze. My husband lay on his back, his mouth wide open. My husband never sleeps that way. He says that laying on his back gives him sleep paralysis. That doesn't matter though. That's not what made me freeze. A little girl stood on my husband's chest, bent at the hips, her long black hair hanging down from her head and just brushing his cheek. The girl's knobbly knees stuck out from under her dress. Her knees were covered in spider webs of tiny black veins, spreading from the front of her knees to the backs. Her dress was white, but stained black in places. I remember biting back a scream as the girl scratched at her leg, and a chunk of grey flesh fell to the mattress. It hit my husband's right arm and rolled to a stop against my chest. I could feel the little girl's flesh squirm with life and baking heat. Before I could pull away, the girl's arm shot out and grabbed the chunk. I watched as she brought the grey meat to my husband's mouth, dropping it in as she let out a deep, gurgling giggle. The girl brought both hands to my husband's chin and proceeded to work his jaw, making my husband chew what she placed in his mouth. "Swallow," I heard the deep voice say from behind the little girl's hair. My husband swallowed on command for the voice. "Open," the voice whispered. My husband opened his mouth, and tiny black things began to fall into his mouth. The girl's head turned towards me as she hummed a song I couldn't place. A nursery rhyme, I think? When she brushed her hair away from her face, I threw myself out of bed. Dark-edged, creamy white pustules nested at both corners of the girl's mouth, crisscrossed with trails of black veins. Up until that point, I thought I was experiencing sleep paralysis. But the moment my ass hit the carpet and my feet started kicking back towards the corner of the room, I knew I was fully awake, and this was happening. The little girl winked at me, torn lips pulling back in a smile that made me want to scream. The girl only had one eye, but it was nothing more than a milky white orb whose surface was riddled with rotting pockmarks. Where the girl's left eye should have been was a cave. Sharp black teeth glistened in the faint light as more of the black things fell from the little girl's mouth into my husband's. It was at that moment that I finally realized what the black things were. The little girl nodded at me like she'd heard what I was thinking, before whispering, "Dead flies." Bile rose in my throat. The little girl perched on my husband's chest as she turned to face me. "Now you know," a deep voice whispered from within the smiling little girl, even though her mouth never moved. "Most of you can't see us, but all can feel us. That itch on your face, right before you drift off to sleep that keeps returning." The little girl giggled deeply and touched her long hair. "Ever wake up in the middle of the night and feel the need to clear your throat?" The little girl opened her gaping mouth a little wider and more of the dead flies rained down upon my husband's face. You've known this your whole life. I found my voice and asked, "What do you want?" in a hoarse voice that didn't sound like my own.
Him?
The little girl said.
Car wreck.
The little girl twisted her head sideways, folding it in towards her chest. Then I woke up to find my husband shaking me, that little smile on his face as usual. "Oh, so it was a dream, you're thinking to yourself? Probably sleep paralysis." It wasn't, though. My husband woke me up this morning in the same corner of the room I'd pushed myself to earlier.
"What are you doing?"
He asked.
"Did you sleep on the floor last night?"
I answered something non-committal and went to take a shower, convinced that it was a dream, or that I was becoming unhinged. Downstairs 20 minutes ago, I kissed my husband goodbye as he left for work. When I walked upstairs, I found something on his side of the bed. 3 perfect piles containing 6 insects each. 6, 6, 6. I've tried calling my husband, but his phone goes straight to voicemail every time. So I'm sitting here with the phone next to me, waiting for it to start ringing, waiting for someone to tell me that my husband is dead. Cause of death? Car wreck. I'm trying not to think of all the times I've had an itch on my face at the edge of sleep. I'm trying not to think of all the times I've woken up in the middle of the night and needed to clear my throat. I'm trying not to think of that little girl standing on my chest as I fall asleep. Try not to think of her when you go to bed tonight, because when you open your eyes, she might be staring down at you, her black teeth glistening through torn lips. I've known this my whole life, and so have you.
White Noise. Written by Anton Scheller. Narrated by Harshly Critical. Static. White noise. They say it's good for you. Your brain can tune out all the distracting noises of the world and instead just focus on the one important thing of the moment. I always enjoyed static. The mindless noise that suffocates all others. Most people try to make the world of cars and people disappear behind a veil of music. But for me, white noise was always more efficient. Turn it on, and after the few moments that your mind takes to adjust, everything unimportant fades into the distance. Without the constant disturbances, your head feels light and clear, and your thoughts can flow freely. Music never did that for me. A few times, friends asked me whether it was damaging my hearing to listen to white noise all day. Of course, they were exaggerating. I only had my ears filled with static whenever I was alone, or wanted to be and feel alone. Static was my escape from the world. Still, their doubts were justified. My doctor said it was okay as long as I gave my brain a break every few hours. Without a break, the brain might adjust to the background noise. It might get addicted to the background noise. I followed his advice and made sure that I unplugged my headphones at least every few hours. They felt so much like part of my body that I sometimes forgot to pull the cables out of my ears, but usually I did. I think I never silenced the world with white noise for more than 4 or 5 hours at a time. At least, not until my seizure. I'm not actually sure whether it was a seizure. It could have been a miniature stroke or anything else that is strong enough to make an adult human unconscious. They never found what it was, but that's not important. What is important is that I was alone at the time. I was on the bed of my rented one-room apartment with a book in my hand and white noise in my ears. I saw my hands cramp. The book fell. Then everything went black. If not for my brother, I think I might have died. He wanted to visit. He rang the doorbell. He called my phone. Then, after half a day,
He called the police. They found me on the bed. My body was lying sideways with my head pushed against the wall. I had a crust of saliva around my mouth and a crust of blood around my ears. My brother said that in the hospital I woke up screaming. When the blackness faded away, it was replaced first by pain and then by noise. Pain and noise. That has been my life for the last 6 months. Even for my friends, it took a while until they understood that I'm not just rude. They still stare at the headphones when I meet them, but they have adjusted. They know that I can hear them through the noise, and they know that I can't hear them anymore without my headphones. With strangers, it is more difficult. Shopkeepers and waitresses always look as if they want to stab me for my rudeness. Making new friends has become hard. Most think that I am trying to make some odd fashion statement. I gave up on dating. But the social implications are not what bothers me. I never was the person that is upset about an evening alone at home. What bothers me are the noises I hear in the rare moments without white noise to drown them out. My doctor says that those 3 days without a break made my brain get used to the white noise. He says it is like an addiction. My brain is accustomed to hearing a constant level of buzzing background, and it reacts strongly when the background noise is taken away. Whenever I pull the headphones out of my ears, the first thing I feel is disorientation, as if I am suddenly falling off a cliff. Then the noises start to scream in my ears. Without the white noise, my brain seems to amplify all noises it registers. The doctor says that when I take the white noise away, my brain is trying to find a new level of background noise. He says we all have our natural threshold as to which noises we notice and which we don't. I destroyed that threshold. I don't mean to say that I can hear more than other people. My hearing has not magically improved by being damaged. But now, whenever the white noise is pulled from my ears, my brain does not know anymore what is background and what is not. My ears hear the same things as they always did, but now my brain consciously registers noises that before were swallowed by mental filters. What used to be background noise seems now, without white noise, as loud as a person speaking right into my ear. I hear a roaring sound, fused sound waves of many sources, the natural white noise that we all have learned not to notice. But there are other noises too. They sound clunky and pale, like music amplified through cheap loudspeakers. But still, they are there, and they are real. I can hear car noises that I would have never noticed before. Despite the thick walls, I can hear my neighbor sweeping the floor, or watching TV, or having sex. I can hear cars 3 streets away. I hear my own heartbeat, and the blood pushing through my arms. I got used to those noises. Despite the screaming level, I would be able to live with them. What I can't live with are the voices. First I thought, they're just distant noises like all the others. But no matter where I go, no matter how deep I am in a forest or underwater, or how many layers of noise blockers are meant to keep them out, I can always hear them. Sometimes more, sometimes less. They vary with the environment. They are not just in my head. As said, they are clunky. Sometimes it's hard to even tell whether they are male or female. Still, I can recognize what they say. They speak about things to do. They discuss what should happen next.
The cup should fall. His knee should hit the table. Her spine should ache.
They don't always talk about me, although they do that too. I never noticed how many seemingly random events surround me. How the water drips, or the cup shakes slightly when it is placed back on the table. How the paper falls into the bin or flies past. There are at least 2 of these voices around everybody. There are at least 5 or 6 around every newborn. I think the newborns are not yet fully adjusted to the background noise. Sometimes, when the voices argue too loudly, the newborns wake up. They scream. With 2 or 3 years, children seem to have adjusted. They all don't notice anymore, even when the voices hiss and curse. I always thought it was good and bad luck. The open shoelaces and ripping grocery bags, the random wind that destroys the hairstyle, the tripping. But when I free my ears from the boundaries of the white noise, I now hear that luck is not random. The voices and their owners decide minutes ahead of time who will trip and who will miss the bus and who will not notice the approaching cars. Some of the voices seem to like the people they are attached to. I saw a boy, he was maybe 4 or 5, that walked without attention and still kept his ice cream in one hand and his feet straight on the floor. Minutes before she got out of her chair, I knew the voices would keep a woman's stroller from rolling down the slanted street even as she forgot to apply the brakes. But I also heard the other side. 2 or 3 voices hissing and laughing from their throats while they planned the next mishap. There was a man in a ripped suit. He ran only by me for a moment, but the voices had been there long before. I had heard them discuss that he would trip and fall and break his arm. And I heard another group of voices, 7 or 8, nearly in hysterics. They were ahead of a little girl of maybe 6 or 7 years. Her dress got stuck on a tree branch. Her paper money was blown from her hand. But I didn't worry about her because of the dress or the money. I heard them discuss in which way best to kill her. Whether to drown her or to hurl her in front of a car. While they discussed, the girl tipped her head to the side and waved at me. I must have stared at her. I waved back and she shyly ran after her mother. The voices followed her.
A fire,
said one of the voices.
I like to hear her scream. A good idea,
said another.
We just need to make sure her mother will see.
The rest I didn't hear. At the beginning, when I still thought they were just in my head, the voices that follow me were gentle most of the time. But they get more angry whenever I talk about them, whenever I mention them. I can hear them scream, right now. I can hear them argue that it can't be that I know. I know that they want to break my chair to punish me. Still, I can only hear. I can't see them. I can't touch them. And whatever they want to do, I can't stop them.
My family just moved to the Midwest a few months ago from the coast, and this winter has been the first time I've ever seen snow. Growing up on the beach, I took great weather and sandy beaches for granted. I know a lot of people dream of vacationing in what was once my backyard, but to me, the most exciting thing in the world is snow. I was pretty excited when we moved here, and even more so when we got our first real snow just a few days ago. It began snowing while we were in class, and the first thing I did when we got out was to try and start a snowball fight. This only pissed off my friends, who I learned are sick of this stuff after having spent their whole lives surrounded by it, but I loved it. I didn't even mind learning the hard way that snow still melts outdoors, and that you'll have to walk the entire way home with freezing wet clothes. As soon as I got home, I changed my clothes and hung my light red jacket in my closet in favor of my only heavy coat. Even though I'm a teenager now and probably a bit too old for this kind of thing, I immediately ran outside and began building a snowman. Our house is at the end of a cul-de-sac, so I wasn't really worried about anyone seeing me, and I spent the rest of that afternoon sculpting a frozen doppelganger. The end result was slightly misshapen, but as far as first attempts go, I thought it was perfect. My parents went out to a Christmas party that evening and told me that they would not be back until late. I didn't think much of it because I usually spend my nights in my room either watching television or on the internet. It was the same story that night. and it was sometime after midnight when I fell asleep. I wasn't out for long, before a loud banging on the back door woke me up. My parents had come home drunk before, but never so drunk that they couldn't open the door. I began to head downstairs when I happened to glance out the window, expecting to see a familiar four-door sedan. There was no car in the driveway. I froze. The knocking got louder and faster. It sounded angry, almost desperate. I moved back towards my bed where my phone was, in case I would need to call the cops. The knocking got so loud that I thought the door was going to give way. I turned on my phone and began dialing the police, when the noise suddenly stopped. In the dreadful silence, I tried to hear any sounds over the thunder of my pulse. Nothing. Were they waiting outside the door? Then I heard the sound. A shrill, high-pitched moan, like air being slowly released from a balloon. It only sounded once, and there's a chance it was just my own breath caught in my tightened throat. Still, it left me shaking. For the rest of the night, I sat in my bed listening to the darkness and fighting off the idea that whoever it had been hadn't really left. Eventually, my parents came home, but as expected, they were hammered, and I knew there was no use trying to explain what I'd been through. The next morning, I discovered that someone had destroyed my snowman. Probably some of my friends, I thought. In a way, I was actually relieved. It all made sense then. Some of my friends must have come over the previous night, knocked down my snowman, and then banged on the door, trying to scare me because they knew my parents weren't home. I couldn't believe that I had let them scare me like that. The only thing that puzzled me was that they had written, "It's so cold outside," in the snow around my snowman. That afternoon after school, I ran straight home and rebuilt my snowman. I wasn't gonna let my friends have the last laugh. That night, my parents stayed home, and I didn't give a second thought to my friend's prank. Since it was Friday night, I was still awake long after my parents had gone to sleep. I was sitting at my computer when the knocking began again. It was quiet at first, but still sharp, like dry bones striking the door. I looked at the clock. It read 4 a.m. The knocking grew louder. I moved towards the window and looked out over the back porch. I could see a shadow standing at the door. Whoever, or whatever it was, it appeared to be very thin and was wrapped in black rags. Then I heard my dad moving downstairs. "Is someone knocking on the door?" he asked in a voice, then let me know he was still half asleep. "Yes, I can see someone out there," I yelled down the stairs. I heard him turn on the porch light, and I looked back out the window. The shadow had vanished. I saw my dad step out onto the porch. He stood there for a moment looking around, before cursing the cold and going back to bed. The next morning, my snowman again lay in pieces, surrounded again by the words, "It's so cold outside." I wasn't sure what my friends were up to, but I nearly panicked when my parents told me that they were going to another Christmas party that night. I spent that Saturday afternoon rebuilding my snowman and even added a mother and father to make a snow family. As the sun began to set, I tried calling some of my friends to see if I could stay the night at their house, but all of them said that they were busy. "I'll bet you are," I thought snidely, confident that they were the ones responsible for the recent events. As soon as it got dark, I turned on the porch light and went upstairs to my room, certain that no one would dare knock on the door while the light was on. I watched some television, and before I knew it, I fell asleep. I was woken sometime later by the sound of heavy breathing. In the darkness of my room, it took me several seconds to realize that the breaths were my own. I inhaled deeply, trying to calm the anxiety that threatened to become panic any minute, but my pulse continued to race wildly. My eyes then began to adjust to the darkness. My room appeared to be empty, but I felt something, a presence weighing down on me. I knew that the television remote was beside my bed, but I also knew that if I moved even a single muscle, it would alert whatever was in my room that I was awake. I remained frozen. Even though I couldn't see a thing, I knew that something was moving, shifting in the darkness. I felt faint, as if I was about to pass out from the terror, my heart palpitating, threatening to stop altogether. As my head began to spin from the lack of oxygen being carried to it, I felt a blast of frigid air at my feet. The sensation crept slowly up my paralyzed body, the cold spreading from my legs to my chest, then to my constricted throat. It paused there, and suddenly I felt as though I was choking. It was too much. I don't know if it was my heart or my brain that gave out first, but in that final moment of terror, I slipped into unconsciousness. The sun was shining when I awoke the next morning, with a terrible headache. My temples throbbed as I made my way to the bathroom and then down to the kitchen. My parents were eating breakfast and looking slightly hungover. Everything appeared to be perfectly normal. I looked out the front window to see if my Snow family had survived the night. The mother and father were missing, apparently dragged to the base of my front steps. For what reason, I had no idea. They had disappeared completely. I was about to call my friends and tell them to knock it off, that the joke had gone on long enough, when my eye caught sight of my original snowman, still in its original position, yet draped in something red. No, I thought, it couldn't be. I ran barefoot in my pajamas through the thick snow. I stopped at the base of my snowman and stared, aghast. I hardly felt the knife-like bite of the sub-zero temperatures against my skin as I struggled to make sense of the implications. The snowman was wearing my light red jacket, the same one I'd hung in my closet the day it first snowed. Anxiety hit me like a wave then, and everything afterwards was a blur. But I remember looking down long enough to make out the new messages that had been written in the snow, and I will never forget the crescendo of police car sirens, or the sound of my parents' muffled screams, as whatever came into my house flayed them, leaving what was left of them floating in pools of water and blood beneath the breakfast table. I remember I stared at the messages for what felt like hours, though it was probably just a few seconds. The first said, "We're still cold." The second, "You look so warm."
A businessman went to a hotel and walked up to the front desk to check in. The woman at the desk gave him his key and told him that on the way to his room, there would be a door with no number on it. It was locked and no one was allowed in there. She also said that no one should look into the room under any circumstances either. He thought that this was a really odd thing to say, but he followed the instructions anyway, went straight to his room, and then went to bed. The next night, while he was bored in his hotel room, his curiosity about the room with no number got the better of him, and he just had to check it out. He walked down the hall to the door, and just like the woman had said, there was no number on it. He tried the handle, but of course it was locked. He bent down and looked through the wide keyhole to try and see if he could make out anything inside the room. Cold air passed through the hole, chilling his eye. What he saw was an ordinary hotel bedroom, just like his own. But in the corner was a woman whose skin was completely white, much whiter than normal. She was facing away from the door, leaning her head against the wall, rocking back and forth, tapping it softly off the hard surface. He stared in confusion for a while as the girl kept hitting her head on the wall. He wanted to knock to see if she was okay, and he almost did, but decided against it at the last second. This decision saved his life. He crept away from the door and walked back to his room, his head swimming with thoughts about the girl. But he tried not to think about it and went to sleep. The next day, he returned to the door and looked through the wide keyhole once again. This time, though, all he could see was a dark redness and nothing else. He couldn't make out anything else except this dark red color, unmoving. Perhaps the inhabitants of the room knew he was spying the night before and had blocked the keyhole with something. At this point, he decided to consult the woman at the front desk for more information. She sighed and said, "Did you look through the keyhole?" The man told her he had, and she said, "Well, I might as well tell you the story then. A long time ago, a man and his wife stayed in that room. People often reported shouting and other noises coming from the room, and they were constantly arguing. One night the shouting stopped, and out of concern the manager checked the room. They found the wife dead on the floor, and the husband was nowhere to be found. No one saw him leave the hotel, and they still don't know where he is. The wife's body was strange, though. It was abnormally white all over, except for her eyes, which were red. A few days later, the businessman was due to check out of the hotel room, but he never did so. No one saw him leave the hotel, and calling his room was met with no answer. Staff went to his room but found nothing. The man was gone, but all of his belongings were still in the room. There was one thing, though. A note on the table that was written in red ink. It said, "She's coming for me."
Betsy the Doll. Written by C.K. Walker. Narrated by Mangaminx for Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. Like most people these days, I had a fucked up childhood. Who doesn't, right? My father took off before I was born, and my mother was left to care for me on her own. A skill she was sorely lacking. My mother slipped right back into the drug-addled party lifestyle she'd enjoyed before I was born, and had soon turned our 2-bedroom apartment into an opium den. For the first 5 years of my life, I walked around in a confused, terrifying mist. The smoky air would flood down the hallway from our living room and slip under my bedroom door. It always seemed to linger for days. I now know that my mother wasn't a bad person, just a victim of her addictions. When she did have spare money, she'd put food in our house or buy me clothes from Goodwill. The only pieces of furniture I had in my bedroom was a mattress set and a little blue and white toy chest. Not that I had a lot of toys to put in it, of course. Just the 3 I'd gotten for my birthdays. One was an art kit, one was a red wagon, and the last, my pride and joy, was a doll named Betsy. Betsy was my friend. We would have imaginary tea parties together, sleep together, and even take baths together. Sometimes I even remember her voice. When I thought back on my conversations with the doll in adulthood, I realised that I was likely suffering from delusions, thanks to the always present butts of smoke that laid claim to the dingy hallways and drafty bedrooms of our small apartment. Still, I remember the sound of her voice, a pleasant, tingling lilt that was almost always coupled with a raucous giggle. I also remember the things that she said to me and the things she wanted me to do. She asked me to steal, usually food or pens and pencils. She wanted me to bring her forks and knives and hit the bad man who slept on our couch. It was always something, and I would always get in trouble. But she wouldn't. When I told my mother who had put me up to these games, she would scoff and shake her head. She never believed me. Adults never do. Around my 6th birthday, I asked my mother for a birthday party. I wanted to invite the mean girls from school and serve them cake and ice cream to make them like me. I remember standing in the kitchen that day with such hopes, having just asked the most important question of my entire life. The glass bottle of Coca-Cola I held was shaking in my nervous hands. I waited, with bated breath, as my mother continued putting groceries away, almost as if she hadn't heard me. But I knew she had. Finally, just as I'd failed a second time to muster the courage to repeat my question, she turned around and gave me a flippant shake of her head. A birthday party? Laura, that's ridiculous. I can't afford to feed 15 children that aren't even mine. Hell, I can barely afford to feed you. You eat like an elephant, especially for a girl your size. Or, I'm sorry, Betsy does. There's barely anything left for me to eat around here, much less a classroom of other people's brats. My face fell as she shook her head, mumbled something else under her breath, and stumbled off into the living room. I heard the music go up then, as more people walked through the door. Some left, some stayed. I never knew them either way. It simply wasn't fair. My mother threw parties all the time. What about me? I was a kid. All my friends had birthday parties, and now the mean girls at school would know I was too poor to have one, and they would tease me even more. I felt tears start to well up in the corners of my eyes, and I choked back a sob while I ran into my room and slammed the door behind me. Betsy was lying on the bed, smiling. She was always smiling. Usually it made me feel better, but today it just made me angry. She just kept staring at me, smiling. She was going to tell me to do something bad again. This was why Mother wouldn't throw me a birthday party. It was because of all the trouble I got into, because of her. This was her fault. Betsy didn't have to go to school, and Betsy never got in trouble like I did. And in my young mind, I truly believed it was the doll, not my mother, who was to blame for everything. I snapped then. I screamed in indignant rage, and I threw the bottle as hard as I could at the bed. It hit Betsy on her forehead, and she fell to the floor. Good. I picked up the bottle, and I hit her again, and again. I thought I heard her laugh, and I hit her harder. Then I laughed. When my rage was spent, I dragged Betsy to the toy chest and threw her in. I slammed it shut and kicked the chest against the wall. I never wanted to see Betsy again. Ever. I never owned another doll after Betsy. About a week later, the police came and 2 nice ladies took me to live in a new home, in a new state, with food and toys and no drugs. The trunk went into storage and the wagon disappeared. I never saw my mother again. As I got older, my foster parents admitted she was in jail, doing 25 years. That was fine with me. I felt nothing for her anyway. I still had nightmares because of my life with that woman. But then slowly, I began to heal. I focused on doing well in school, and I ignored my mother's letters from prison. She reached out to me several times in my 20s as well, but I always declined her calls. That is, until this morning. I'm 30 now, with my own children and a loving, honest husband. I have a beautiful house, 2 dogs, and a career as a social worker, trying to make a difference for kids who had it bad like me. I'm happy, I'm steady, and I'm content. So when I got a voicemail from my mother informing me she'd been paroled and she wished to speak, I decided to let her say her piece. Since the kids were home from school, I went out into the shed in the backyard to return my mother's call. The shed was the children's domain, and they used it to play in the summer. I sat on my old toy chest, which was currently being used as a tea party table, and dialed the number she'd left me. 3 rings.
Hello? Laura?
Hello, Mother. How are you?
Oh, Laura, thank you for speaking to me. I know you have your own life now, and a family. I would love to meet them someday. I just wanted to tell you how sorry I am for everything.
Mother, you are not meeting my kids. Ever. And since you called me, I'm going to say what I have needed to say for years. The opium. The heroin. They destroyed you. And the worst of it is that you almost took me down with you. I was 5. That was no home for a child. Honestly, I'm surprised it took you so long to get caught.
Laura, I know how it seems, but I honestly know nothing. Look, it hardly matters, and I do understand why you would feel that way, why you would hate me and not want me to meet your little ones. I learned a lot about forgiveness while I was away, and just... Oh, Laura, I'm so sorry about Betsy.
Betsy? I paused, confused. Why would you care about her?
I know, Laura. Believe me, I do. It was all my fault. The drugs, the partying, and Betsy. Oh, God! If only I paid attention. If I only known. She's gone. It's because of me.
As my mother began to cry, I tapped my fingers on the toy box impatiently. The drugs had clearly fried her brain. Mother, I sighed. Why are you talking about Betsy? And why do you even care? I know where Betsy is. Right underneath me.
What are you talking about, Laura? Oh, God, where is she?
I shifted uncomfortably. Well, Betsy's in the trunk, where she's always been. There was a beat of stunning silence.
What do you mean your sister's in the trunk?
Sister? What the hell are you talking about? Back on the drugs so soon? That's a record, even for you. Betsy is a goddamn doll. I locked her in my toy box a few days before you got arrested for possession.
Laura? Oh, God. No, Laura, what have you done? I wasn't arrested because of the drugs, Laura. I was arrested because of Betsy's disappearance. You always called her your little doll. But we thought you knew. Oh, God. We thought you knew. Laura, no, what have you done to my baby?
My mind had gone blank, and with no emotion, I set the phone down next to me and stood up. I could hear the muffled sound of my mother's anguished cries and feel the dark clutch of possibility in my own chest. Memories were stirring in the back of my mind, threatening to flood forward into my consciousness. They pushed against the door in my mind that had been locked so tightly for so long that I'd forgotten it was even there. Was it even possible? Could the trauma and the opium have really led me to believe that a small child was actually a doll? Begging for food and utensils to eat with? Asking me to protect her from the bad man? No. I slowly turned around and brought my eyes down to the makeshift tea party table. Surely it was too small. You couldn't fit a person in there. You couldn't! Then, what about a very small, starving, emaciated child? What about her? Would she fit? Would an investigator even bother looking for a person in this chest? I knew I wouldn't. It was just too small. And I was sure we had opened the toy box at some point over the years. Hadn't we? Or had something swimming in the dark recesses of my memories always stopped me? I couldn't remember ever seeing it open. I knelt down to the ground and opened the clasps. It would be better not to look. After all that I had overcome, this new life that I'd earned for myself, it could all be undone by opening this toy box. I shouldn't open it. I should throw it in the landfill and forget it ever existed. I should not look inside. I opened the chest. I never had a doll. My mother could never afford to buy me one. I never had a wagon either, for that matter. But I did have a toy box. A pretty blue and white toy box. And when I was 5, I beat my little sister to death and put her in it. Now my life is over.
Tombstoning. Written by The Itch. Narrated by Harshly Critical.
Come on, you pansy! Jump! Jump!
Mikey yelled up from next to me. The water was cold, and the only thing keeping me warm was treading water, and the adrenaline from my taking the plunge mere moments ago.
Come on, Jeffy, don't be a pussy.
Jenny shouted next, from her place up on some of the other rocks. We all laughed and giggled self-consciously at her crude taunt. I heard Genevieve Saunders gasp. Jeffy looked scared, and I didn't blame him. Dead Man's Drop had its name for a reason. It was a sheer wall of granite straight down to the dark quarry waters below. I remember the first time I jumped 4 summers ago. It took me hours of watching the others plummet into the murky pool, and another half hour up on the ledge before I'd worked up the courage to jump. No one could ever quite agree exactly how high the drop was. Most of the other kids at school said it was about 40 feet. Mikey told me he thought it was 50, maybe even more. The only thought I had when I stared at that dark rock wall, cracked and marred in places by tiny streamlets of water finding their way home to the pool at the bottom, was that it was high. I measured the drop in seconds. Those seconds after that first time I closed my eyes and jumped and felt gravity do its work. Those seconds I prayed would not be my last, while I felt the cold spring air whoosh by me until I felt the bottoms of my feet slap the water's surface hard, and the kersplash of the invigorating cold waters of the dark quarry pool. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000. Come, Jeffy, jump! I yelled through my shivering.
He's not gonna jump.
Fat Tommy said from across the water.
He's chicken.
Before, I'd thought Jeffy looked scared. But now I was worried because he didn't look really scared, only a little. I knew from 2 summers ago that it was better for somebody to be really scared than just a little scared. What's the word? Timid. The new kids who were really scared, they never jumped. They'd watch the rest of us hoot and holler and plunge over the side, but they'd never work up the courage to do the same. They could stand on the edge of Dead Man's Drop for a bloody century, and they'd never feel any better about throwing themselves over. They'd only feel worse. And then would climb back down amidst taunts of scaredy cat, scaredy cat. What was worse were the kids who were just a little scared. The kids who looked like Jeffy Combs did right now. His awkward, pale little body with his gangly little chicken legs, standing near the rock wall's edge with his thin face peering over. The kids who were only a little scared were the ones who'd hurt themselves. They'd jump and then change their mind in midair and go into the water with their mouth open, or land all funny, or not make it far enough out. That's what happened to Jimmy from Miss Franklin's class 2 summers ago when he broke his foot on the rocks, and what Dad told me happened 15 years ago. A blonde boy from out of state had cracked his head, and then all the police came, and then nobody snuck into the quarry for quite some years. But they came back. No one can keep us thrill-seekers away from the drop for long, and people's memories in a small town are short. "Come on, Jeffy, you fag," Tommy yelled. I saw Mikey looking up in anticipation, a big grin on his face. Now I wished I hadn't said anything. Jeffy was a gangly little nervous kid, and I was worried now that he was going to be one of the ones we'd heard about. One of the ones who was scared, but not quite scared enough. One of the timid ones. Or maybe not. I watched Jeffy adjust his glasses, take a few steps back, run and jump. Genevieve Saunders screamed. He cleared the wall, but he didn't jump out far enough, and we all knew it. Those 4 seconds when Jeffy fell were the longest I could remember since I first jumped. And we all waited, holding our breaths, to see his pale little body go splat on those rocks that broke Jimmy's foot 2 summers ago, right at the drop's bottom. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4... But he made it after all. Kersplash! Into the quarry depths. All the girls up on the rocks yelled, and all the boys and I cheered and hollered despite ourselves, and how much of a little wiener we all knew Jeffy to be. I even heard some of the guys up at the top clapping. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4...
Oh my god!
Jenny's scream broke the spell of our excitement. Suddenly, the quarry air was depleted of our youthful energy and felt desolate and cold. The only sound was the hiss of tiny bubbles coming up from where he'd gone in.
Somebody, do something!
There was fear underneath the words, and tears behind, waiting to come out. From deep inside, something took a hold of me, something I didn't understand and had never felt before, and I swam towards the rock wall with all I had. I reached the churning circle of bubbles, took a deep breath, and dove. I feared the worst. The quarry water was brown and stung my eyes, but I had to keep them open to find him. It was dark, and I knew the water was deep here, probably 20 feet or more, but I had to look. I pulled myself down, deeper and deeper into the icy cold depths. Pressure built on my chest, and I could feel the pain of the water pushing against my eardrums, intensifying with every foot lower I went. I saw him. Through the brown haze was the bleached white skin of Jeffy, right near what I reckoned must have been the bottom. My lungs were burning now, and I had to act fast. I had to grab him and go, or we'd both drown. I swam closer and saw he wasn't unconscious and laid out on the quarry bottom or doing the dead man's float like I would have thought. Jeffy was upright, just like how he'd entered the water, just like how all us kids entered the water. That's why it's called tombstoning. As I came near enough to grab him, I saw the image that would mar my childhood and haunt the deepest, darkest waters of my nightmares for years to come. I cried out, and the sound of my horror was muffled in a cloud of bubbles. Through the murk, I saw the mouth of Jeff's pale body still open in his last silent scream, and in it, the end of the rebar rod, which had speared him.
thing. The thing has been there for almost a week now. The figure in the window. It looks featureless. Only skin on a human frame. And it's pressing itself against the glass somehow. I don't know how it got there. I don't even know how to get rid of it. At first I thought it was a prank, a doll or a mannequin that some jerks put there to scare me. But I realized as I walk out my house to pull it away, it wasn't there. I shrugged it off, thinking that someone had hidden it while I was talking through my door. But I went back and I looked out the same window. It was looking in, staring at me. I walked around my house, yelling for whoever it was to come out, but no one was there. The thing is hairless, naked, and it didn't look like it actually had eyes, or even a face at all, but its head is turned towards me when I enter the room. When I sit on my computer, I can feel its faceless hatred boring into my skin, into my neck. But when I turn around, it's innocently turned in a different direction. Finally, on Thursday, I tried to open the window, but it's stuck. I think that thing's hands are keeping it down. But I got a good look at its face. Its eyes, its mouth, are behind the skin, pushing outwards. It stared at me, smiling. Of course, I screamed. I pulled back a fist and smashed it onto the glass, determined once and for all to get rid of the glaring monster. I know I'm strong enough. That glass should have cracked, but it didn't. It shuddered under my hand, but it didn't break. And that smile just got wider and wider and wider, until I thought its head would break in half. It raised its own hand and bashed the window with its palm. It was mocking me. But I saw the faintest crack begin to appear where it had hit, and I backed away. No way did I want that smile in the same room as me. So I got a roll of duct tape and I started covering the window. I couldn't look directly at it. I nearly shit my pants just knowing it was watching me. But I couldn't help it. I took a quick glance at the skin-covered face, a small peek. It was angry. That grin was now a gaping frown full of teeth. The skin had ripped away from its mouth, and I could see it down its carnivorous throat. A menacing rumble started to fill the house, and that hairline crack began to spread like splintering ice. I pulled down the duct tape. The rumbling stopped. The splint skin healed over, and it began to smile again. Now it's the night, and the noise hasn't started again. There are no sounds, no rumbles, no crackling glass. Everything's quiet now. I can feel its claws gripping the back of my chair. I can hear its skin stretching as it smiles. It's watching me type this.
When I was 8, my family moved into an old colonial house that was built in 1810, and my father still lives there. Until I was 17, every night before I fell asleep, I would feel pressure next to me as if someone sat down on the bed beside me. This would always be accompanied with a feeling of increased pressure in the air. Although I knew this probably didn't happen to everyone, I didn't think much about it. Until I got a cat. He was a present for my 12th birthday. Each night, he would lie down on the bed near my feet, and every single night, he would jolt awake from a dead sleep and glare at something in the doorway before running out of the room. And a few minutes later, the feeling of pressure would return. Again, while this was a weird thing to happen, I didn't really question it. Maybe the cat was just neurotic. But I didn't talk about this nightly occurrence to anyone. However, I did refer to this feeling or presence or whatever you want to call it as Charlotte. And I don't know why. So one day in the summer when I was about 13, An elderly man and his middle-aged daughter pulled up to our house and explained that he used to live here with his aunt while he was just a boy, and he raised his family here for a few years. They had been visiting family in the neighborhood, and they wondered if they could take a tour for old time's sake. My mom said sure, and she, my sister, and I led them around the house as they recalled different memories. Afterward, my mom asked them if they remembered any strange occurrences or stories about the house. Like ghosts? The old man asked and chuckled. His daughter became very quiet and said firmly, "It's not funny, Dad." The man explained that everyone who slept in one of the bedrooms felt a little unsettled, and his daughter interrupted to say that she always felt as if someone sat on the edge of her bed as she tried to go to sleep. Her father said they used to joke that it was just his aunt looking out for them. His Aunt Charlotte. This confirmed what I never wanted to admit to myself. I had a freaking ghost that basically tucked me in at night for the past 5 years. Still, going to bed was never very freaky or scary. I just tried to ignore the feeling when it came. Until one night when I was about 16. My parents had been going through a rough patch in their marriage. I was feeling depressed, and in general, it was just a weird year. I went to bed, and after about 20 minutes, the cat took to his typical bolting exit from the room, and of course, I felt a familiar pressure on my side. Then I felt a hand brush through my hair. I jumped out of bed and ran straight downstairs to the living room where my mom was dozing. She woke up when I burst into the room, saw my face, and asked what was wrong. I just told her I had a nightmare and left it at that. I spent the next week sleeping in the guest room, and when I finally returned back to my own room, I was nearly asleep when I realized I didn't feel the pressure next to me anymore. But I did feel pressure in the air. I rolled on my back and saw the figure of a woman in the corner, wearing a house dress and a veil over her face with her arms folded. She was looking right at me, very concerned. When I found my voice, she disappeared. I said out loud, "I don't care if you stay, but I can never, ever, ever see you again." And I never did. A few years later, my parents divorced, and my dad moved in with his girlfriend and their 4-year-old son. I wasn't really surprised when she told me that her little boy said a lady named Charlotte told him stories at night.
I'd actually seen him on our way home from school. He looked dirty and disturbed and stared straight at us as our bus went by. We even made jokes about him, probably as our way of pretending we weren't afraid. He was incredibly out of place in our middle-class suburb, so his mere presence felt threatening. Thus our panic when the three of us got off our stop and saw him at the corner, about to look in our direction. He was between us and our house, and the bus had already pulled away, so we bolted for the bushes of a nearby yard. We weren't sure if he had seen us, but we peered through the leaves and saw him stalking our way, muttering randomly. Tim, my neighbor, insisted that he had seen a large knife in the man's ragged clothing. Danny, a kid I hardly knew who had just moved into the neighborhood, insisted that he was imagining it, that Tim's glasses must have reflected the sun wrong or something. Still, we were terrified, and the sidewalk was going to bring him right by us. It was Tim that broke and ran first, keeping low. I followed, my heart pounding, as we dove into the darkness underneath the porch of the unfamiliar house we'd been hiding near. As we squeezed our bodies against the dirt, the grimy wood pressed into our backs, barely giving us enough room to breathe. From our hiding place, we could see the disturbed man turning to the yard in front of us, and begin searching around, hitting the bushes and muttering angrily. I realized then that Danny wasn't with us, but I hadn't seen where he'd gone. Tim had lost his glasses back at the bushes, and he just huddled into the shadows next to me in near blind terror. We stayed there in silence, waiting. Every so often, whenever I almost thought it was safe to come out, footsteps would creep across the wooden porch above us. Tim almost sneezed once, but I covered his mouth and nose in stark fear. We waited there so long that the tone of the sunlight began to change. We hadn't heard the man searching about in a while, and I was just getting ready to peek out, when footsteps clattered and a thud hit the wood directly above us. A split second later, Danny's face appeared in front of us, upside down, and he looked at us through the lattice. A look of shock and surprise crossed his features at finally finding us. He whispered something, but I couldn't hear anything. He seemed to be saying, "Come closer." So I figured the horrible man was still around, and we had to be quiet, and I inched forward. Danny's features grew fearful, and he kept indicating something above us. Strangely, I still couldn't hear him. His eyes seemed to dim then, and I inched forward a little bit more. I froze for a moment in horror, then backed up. Tim mouthed to me. What did he say? And I just shook my head, completely in shock. Danny hadn't conveyed, "Come closer." He had mimed, "He's up there." The drifter was unknowingly sitting right above us, waiting. Because he knew we had to be somewhere in that yard. There was nothing to do but wait in silence, trying not to scream. I was glad Tim had lost his glasses. I lay there as darkness descended, waiting in unwavering terror, and trying not to feel the glassy stare of Danny's severed head as it rested in the grass a foot away.
Thanks for listening. The story you've just heard in this channel are fan-funded. Visit chillingtalesfordarknights.com today to become a patron and help us bring radio theater back from the dead. Just click support us, choose an amount you're comfortable with, and become a part of our family today. Just $2 per month gets you immediate access to our patrons area. There, you'll find advanced new releases, our incredible archive of over 300 hours of productions, plus never-before-heard bonus material. Best of all, it's totally ad-free and in HD MP3 format. You get insider updates from our production team, the secret stash of streaming downloadable HD indie films, and you get to experience our patrons-only one-on-one live events, putting you up close and personal with your favorite performers, unscripted and unrehearsed. All of this and more is yours today, and all you have to do is choose your level of support. Go to chillingtalesfordarknights.com now and join us as we turn off the lights and turn on the dark.